Welcome, everyone, to the 20th episode of our podcast. Tonight is going to be a very special episode, or should I say, a very special series that is quite dear to my heart, where we're going to be covering a blast from the past as far as ancient Greek history, or should I say, the lost, forgotten ancient Greek history. And, it wouldn't be, the same unless we were talking about math. But in particular, the other reason why I'm doing this we're doing this podcast as well, is simply because I feel like that the education system in general is in quite a pickle, especially related to math education. And so the topic that we're going to be talking tonight, well, first, before we go into, by the way, it's pronounced Thales of Miletus. Before we're going to talk about the video, and I'm going to pin the link in the description, I thought that maybe in the beginning we'd give some backstory. That's why I have in my notes here. There's 10 talking points. I'm sure we'll be able to cover all 10. It just depends on how this podcast goes. Jason and I never really rehearsed any of these things, right? So we're going to first talk about or introduce, just in general, the new calculus channel and what it's all about. So Chase, as I'm pinning the link in the description, would you like to share first your experience with the new calculus channel and how you even were able to come across it in the beginning?
All right, thank you, Brandon, for that intro. The new calculus channel. So basically, it all started with my experience in the university system. I got up to calculus 3, and surely I did that, but that wasn't without fault from calculus 1 and 2. And like the way the classes were being taught and basically the entire subject material was like memorize this equation and then take a test on it, and pretty much like the entire math system is just like memorize this and then good luck on the test after all you memorized. But we're not going to really talk about the fundamentals of mathematics. We're just going to throw this at you and that's going to work out. Obviously that didn't work out for me, and I was like really disappointed that I never really learned the fundamentals of mathematics. So after that experience, I had a spiritual awakening, sort of, where I just realized like a whole bunch of things, and like, why is math the way it is today? And it's all based on the history of mathematics. And if you haven't researched the history of mathematics, that's a whole other thing, but I encourage you to do so. So what I was looking for was like an alternative to the university system mathematics that didn't use infinity, that was not based on axioms. And I came across this guy named John Gabriel during my searching for this alternative education of mathematics. And basically what John was teaching was a math that was founded on geometry, basically, without axioms or postulates. It was all sound geometry based on nothing fundamentally. So you could build the entire history of mathematics from nothing. And you're wondering, how is that possible? Well, it's possible because of a thing in geometry called the point. So before the point is nothing, which is just complete void. And then you ask yourself, where am I in this void? And asking that question creates the idea of a point. The point you see on a piece of paper is not an actual point because it has dimension, but a point itself is without dimension, it's simply location. And from location, you can ask, where do I want to go? And that's another point. So fundamentally, the definition of a line is what is the shortest distance between 2 points? Because if you take any other path, it wouldn't be a line. It would just be like this crazy circular, wibbly wobbly, not anything but a line. So then, after researching John and all of his work in this geometry based mathematics, I came to realize how just the university professors hate him so much for revealing this knowledge to us. And because it's knowledge, John doesn't have to prove it's right. You can prove for yourself the correctness of the new calculus. So that's my experience with new calculus, and I've met Brandon. We talk about it. And then I started making videos about the new calculus for John and Brandon. And that's what I have to say so far.
Thank you, Chase. Could you also put in the comments before mod me as well as so I can. Great. All right, hold on. Let me just see if I can pin the link to the video. I have it right here. There we go. Epic. All right. So here's so I'll give you kind of my story as far as mathematics is concerned. So well, I will say that back during my days within the public education system, I mean I did well within my classes, but I really didn't fundamentally understand like what I was really doing. It was like I was just being shoved around and thrown all kinds of mathematical techniques or algorithms, but I never really understood why am I even doing this? What do these equations mean? What's the the theoretical foundation? And I've heard from one mathematician that what's taught in school is apparently based on um, assumptions and axioms. And I don't know. Like when I think about that, I just feel like it's just a bunch of um, indoctrination. Considering, all right, so if you memorize these equations, right, and solve like these, cookie cutter, exercises, right, in mathematics, where do you go from here? Where do you go from here? What happens when you are dealing with problems in the field of STEM that these algorithmic techniques that you're taught in school cannot allow you to solve these particular problems. So at the time I was trying to make sense of mathematics back then. Confused the hell out of me. Like I said, I only made it up to during my mathematical journey. I think back into like AP calculus, AB. I got a B in the course. Wasn't able to pass the AP calculus exam. Go figure. I never really was like good with standardized testing, but at the same time, yeah. So, but at the same time, I still wanted to learn. I still wanted to learn math. I still had a love to explore the math and sciences. So, that's also why. That's actually part of the reason why I'm a licensed CPA and work in accounting was because I couldn't make the cut right within the system. that teaches math and science that, according to the system, I was not cut out for STEM. So that's why I'm a licensed CPA instead. And I've always, yearned for the alternative path. So my story was, I basically failed out through the system, and then I came across, and then I randomly, it was like complete random. Like I randomly just, I don't know, I remember I probably typed in a certain question, and I came across John Gabriel's channel, and I think, the appeal to me when I first started watching a few of his videos was that he was explaining that the way math was taught and the way that math was understood was essentially done, incorrectly. It wasn't very clear. And then he made like a bunch of other videos where he would talk about, various learning techniques, problem solving techniques, you know, and pretty much derive everything from nothing, which I was amazed by. So, and I was like, and at the time, um, I actually spoke with him when I added him on LinkedIn. And so what he did, because I met him back in 2016, and that was like back when I was just starting out working in public accounting, and I was a naive, college graduate, as many people were. And my at the time, so John had posted a bunch of questions on LinkedIn, mostly conceptual questions in math. It was questions that I have never seen a math teacher, put. And I thought to myself, okay, let me answer, these particular questions. And sure enough, as I was answering those questions, I actually felt like I was learning math because it covered the theoretical foundations of it. So as I continued to answer, these questions he would post on LinkedIn, which of course he was amazed by. And I was also shocked to hear that even like, mainstream math professors, had a difficult time, answering these questions, which, really kind of puzzled me. Like, do math teachers really, understand what they're talking about? you know, so fast forward that, he basically took me under his wing as a mentor, and then eventually I became, so passionate about, his vision and the fact that he wanted to pretty much transform math education through this alternative system that Chase and I had decided to at one point work with him to create the new math channel. And so that was awesome. That was great. We did that for a couple videos, and then that kind of petered out. And then of course John continued to create videos on the new calculus channel that you'll see from the link in the above. But sadly, I think about like last month or so, John has been in decline due to, yeah, I guess poor health, mostly because of his eyesight. Um, because he used to be a software programmer as a freelance contractor for various companies, and that ended up, basically deteriorating one of his eyesight, so he can barely even see with one of his eyes, and his other one is like, also deteriorating, so he can't really be using the computer device, telephone and computer devices anymore. So, and he also had this other guy that wanted to, that could have helped him with the new calculus channel, but he kind of bailed out. I guess he didn't have any interest. So now, fast forward to now, it's basically now Chase and I are now the administrators, right? That's kind of the big announcement, from that we're the administrators of the new calculus channel. So we're going to be essentially creating more videos. Trust me, we got plenty of material. I got this is the first one, Thales of Miletus, which I have to admit, for anybody for any newcomers here that are not used to the theoretical foundations that stem from geometry, may find it, maybe somewhat difficult to follow because it's because you have to kind of, because here's the thing, like the way that mathematics, right, is taught in the past, as I mentioned before, has to do, well, they would start with, right, they already start with number, but then you don't really understand, where number comes from. Okay, that's why Chase mentioned before about the point, because essentially you start from nothing. So you start from, well, really, it's not that you start from nothing. There's a systematic way of deriving well-formed concepts via noumena. Or, well, it's noumenon is singular, noumena is plural, right? So, and I can kind of go through really quickly. Sorry, Chase, am I talking too much? Should we...
No, it's good. This is great.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, so, and yeah, if any of you guys have any, questions as I'm talking, please leave in the comments, or if you'd like to, come up and join in this discussion, because that's also why we're doing this podcast too. Because if you have watched the video and if you happen to be confused from the video, or if any of you can offer any feedback that can actually, improve future videos, because look, Chase and I support, John's vision. In fact, we love to be bold enough to even, possibly, reform the math education curriculum. And really testing to see if these, methodologies really are effective. We want to know. The problem is that, academia, has not really tested these methods. Maybe, I mean, who knows? Maybe, could John have been, because academia holds the position that John is a crank and that these methodologies don't work. Chase and I happen to, disagree, and, we'd like to test it. We don't know if there's any schools, doesn't matter, K through 12, college, university, that would actually endorse, a course like this, at least to try and test it out as a prototype. So, so we're here pretty much, promoting the new calculus channel. We're also we are going to be talking about the Thales of Miletus, which covers parallel lines theorem. So I think that's kind of, well, I think we did the first bullet point was introduce a new calculus channel, provide backstory. Okay, so we did provide both our perspectives. So I guess question number 3, and maybe I can put this back with Chase, or maybe we touched upon it before. What do you think is the mission of the new calculus channel, and what is John Gabriel's vision?
So his overall mission is to change the way people think about mathematics. That is different from the way that mathematics is taught today. People just assume that the history of mathematics is the accurate way that mathematics should be taught. People say that mathematics is an invention rather than a discovery. Personally, I believe mathematics is a discovery, so these perfect concepts exist independently of the human mind and can be discovered by anyone.
Thank you, Chase. Yeah. So, yeah, I agree with you. Um, so yeah, the mission of like I said, we support the vision that John Gabriel has as far as math education is concerned, and I'm excited as well to to continue learning and exploring you know how these concepts are derived, how to derive them from nothing, how, and most importantly is just be like based on the framework, because you have to understand that this entire framework is based on now. So here's some food for thought. When I asked John a question as far as what book would you recommend to study mathematics, now if you were to ask any typical or traditional math teacher, they probably give you like a laundry list of textbooks, and maybe they would cover like you know
Set theory and all this other crap, linear algebra, like what is that? Come on.
exact, yeah, right. So yeah, you get my point. So they would just recommend courses from the traditional curriculum, which would start from algebra, then geometry, trigonometry, calculus, etc. um, and but instead what John told me to do, or recommended for anyone that wants to really study math, was actually um, to study philosophy, but not just to, well, yeah, okay, study philosophy, but he particularly told me to study works of Plato. But he didn't. But he told me not to study the works of Plato for the sake of just like memorizing any of the whatever the teachings were from the dialogues or whatever. It was more so because yeah, that's also kind of the mission of the New Calculus channel, was also to pretty much like bring back the genius and ancient wisdom of the ancient Greeks, who to this day it blows my mind what they had done and figured out thousands of years ago.
Mind if I say something?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I've taken psychedelics before, and it just made me realize that other people can also experience psychedelics. And this is not a new concept. Like people long ago have been taking psychedelics and can easily realize things that have been I realized on psychedelics as well. So it's like why is no one talking about this? I guess just like today people are so caught up in the stories and narratives that the mainstream likes to push out.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, and that's the other thing too, about Chase and I, and the whole, I guess, overarching theme of the Dante and Virgil Musings podcast is that in some videos, or sorry, in some podcasts, that you know we we would like to be able to explore the path that is least walked, because we think that there is definitely buried treasure of wisdom within the path that is least taken. And really, when it comes to the hero's journey in general, I mean, It wouldn't be an adventure, right? If there wasn't danger, if we didn't,
Exactly.
yeah. So, it wouldn't be, an adventure, we wouldn't be like the heroes of the day, pretty much. And I will boldly say that I think that John Gabriel, is not just like a great man. I also think he is a hero, because he sacrificed, basically having his entire life ruined, for the sake of enlightening, math education. That's that's another mission of the New Calculus Channel, was to stand up against mainstream academia. And I personally think that is something that's very noble and commendable. And Chase and I both know, John Gabriel personally, and you can agree he is a great man. And I know, and even despite the fact this guy can barely even freaking see, and he has all kinds of health problems, you know he's still sharp as hell. Like, he's like, even right now he's trying to get the login for the new math channel that we're going to basically be rebooting. Well, yeah, we're going to be continuing, which I'm really excited, because I think, really, before watching the new calculus channel, which may cover more advanced concepts, and I guess I could pin the link there too. But really, the whole purpose why we were also working on the new map channel, has to do with basically starting from scratch. And that's basically, when you watch that series, it literally starts from scratch. Like, we cover Numina, and then we also cover the prologue of Euclid, the 5 requirements of Euclid, and then we covered what is a number, and then we also had some the basic notions. So we covered, I believe, equivalency, and then I think the last video that was published before we had to go on a hiatus on that channel covered the arithmetic mean, which I can tell you that what John has published, I don't think like anybody else had come to this understanding. Like, as far as I know, and I mean, I'm sure there are people out there that are questioning, academia, but then I still see them post, like, oh, it's a new axiom. Really? That's, it's just you're just not going to find this content
By the way,
anywhere else. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
axioms are just assumptions that collectively we have faith that it's true. That doesn't sound very positive to me.
Yeah, right. It doesn't sound positive, and it just sounds like um it's interesting, because I remember listening to
Yeah,
an
so if it's
interview.
just an assumption, what's the difference between mathematics today and religion?
Right, exactly. So and that's why, John, coins the term the Church of Academia.
Where they
Which
teach mathematics.
they call it, that's what John calls it. He calls it, mathematics. But really, the whole reason why he coins that term is simply because the idea that, and it stems from, again, philosophy. Okay, that's one of the biggest, issues that math education is having, is simply because the philosophy is screwed up. The philosophy is essentially screwed up because the concepts don't make any sense. They're not well-formed concepts. They're not clearly defined. Um, you have a bunch of mathematicians that are coming up with all kinds of theories and rules and axioms, but there's never been any. You know how? I'll put this another way. I'll boldly say this, even though maybe I'll be wise or maybe I'll be fool later in later years. But fundamentally, what John's work and what the work of the ancient Greeks were doing was essentially discovering a unified system of mathematics. Could I is that bold to say that, Chase? Does that sound
Or
right?
rather, the system of mathematics.
Right, the system of mathematics, the correct system of mathematics. Now, I don't want to get to, because I know we're not going to be talking. I know there's probably other philosophers or philosophies out there that may talk about like relativism and things like that. But hey, if you want to just review it, if you want to just view this system or whatever as just a mere paradigm, and it probably isn't like the true system of mathematics, that's fine. You know, we of course respect that, but that's sort of that was, but that's the intent. That's the intention. Again, that's the mission of the New Calculus channel, was to derive the correct system of mathematics, and to provide a tools and a framework for STEM educators, STEM professionals, and STEM students to use in order to build and solve any particular problem within that curriculum, which is what John did. John was, like I said, John was quite, successful as far as his backstory is concerned. I remember he was a great software developer. He was a great actuary. The guy was even an actuary at one point. And yeah, he was able to solve problems within those professions that I don't think anybody else could solve. And sure, maybe somebody could just naively say, well, the guy was just like, a genius, right? Well, in a way, that's also true too, because he has an IQ of 160. So, okay, maybe, yeah, empirically, yes, he is a genius. But I think that's very short-sighted, you know, considering that really it was because he had discovered a brilliant methodology that I think if it can be, taught and communicated, to STEM professionals, especially to those, of course, that you know, it can be quite helpful. So, all right, we're gonna now transition to my fourth talking point, which is we're gonna tie this back more with you, Chase. What is the mission of four-dimensional education, and how this is applied to the New Calculus channel?
Oh man, four-dimensional education. Wow. Well, basically, you're living a life in this three-dimensional world. Wouldn't it be very helpful to discover a way of teaching yourself through this hypothetical fourth dimension called metacognition? So if you have cognition, you're already halfway there. You just have to realize you can use these three dimensions of knowledge, character, and skills that anyone can acquire. You just have to realize how they all connect with each other through your own cognition. And this is relevant to the new calculus because for dimensional education, it's imperative that you comprehend mathematics instead of mythmatics. So in four-dimensional education, there's the skills. So you can have either mental skills or physical skills. The area of mathematics is very similar to religion, and that's in the area of mental skills. But real mathematics is on the area of character. So mathematics is a character trait. That's so groundbreaking. So if you develop yourself personally in the process of doing that, you're also learning mathematics. And that's just the intro I can say about it. But if you have any more questions for me, Brandon, I'm more than willing to answer.
Right. So, yeah, thank you for the introduction to four-dimensional education. So, right. So the reason why I wanted to mention this as a talking point because so to me four-dimensional education is a very once actually applied and understood, because again, like, okay, great, you throw out the term four-dimensional education, and that's another reason why I feel like if we're going to create a course, right, or something like that, because I understand that four-dimensional education can sound very, like, theoretical. It covers, okay, knowledge, skills, personality, metacognition. Okay, so it's like some people ask the question, well, how do I apply this? How do I find the answers? How do I live my life? Like they ask, one could ask, questions like that, or how can I figure out, what are the, I guess, yeah, I'll ask these questions like, what are the qualities of being a great mathematician, or being a great math teacher, right? So,
So, questions you ask yourself is a mental skill, and questions you ask other people is a physical skill.
right, right, exactly. So, and yeah, so let's see, where was I going with this? So, and let's see. Jesus, how does this apply? So, do you have so Chase, well, I guess one of the I guess if we talk about like metacognition, right? How would that be applied or connect with the new calculus channel? As far as we're thinking about thinking and reflecting.
Thinking and reflecting is basically what metacognition is. So, I had no idea what metacognition was in school when growing up, and I realized how important it is if you want to have self-awareness and not be afraid of what other people think or what other people do. If you do something that's unique and you don't want to be afraid, this is what metacognition is about. And if you're learning by yourself, being able to reflect upon your own thoughts that you, like, let's say you go out and you experience something and then you feel a certain way, you think a certain way, you come back home, you can reflect on those thoughts through metacognition and realize something new. So every experience you have is fundamentally a learning experience.
Thank you, Chase. All right, so that was about close to 40, like, yeah, 40 minutes of backstory. Um, yeah, let's talk about, um, yeah, well, actually, let's talk about Thales of Miletus. So, Chase, before this podcast, have you done any? Because I have an article open that I can read a little bit about him. But did you? And then we're gonna then touch upon the video that was discussed. Did you happen to get any background information about him?
So I know very little about Thales, I think. So he was apparently the first Greek mathematician, so that's pretty cool. And he was the first, recorded human to predict a, I don't know if it's lunar eclipse or solar eclipse, but either way, he predicted an eclipse for the first time in history. So that's all I have to say about him.
All right, so just to give some backstory, I will. I hate using Wikipedia because doesn't have the most perfect information, but we'll get into at least some backstory, and then we'll actually talk about the main topic of the video and try to actually make sense of it. So, all right, so Thales of Miletus was a Greek mathematician, astronomer, statesman, and pre-Socratic philosopher from Miletus in Ionia, Asia Minor. It's very interesting to note. He was one of the 7 sages of Greece. Many, most notably Aristotle, regarded him as the first philosopher in the Greek tradition, and he is otherwise historically recognized as the first individual known to have entertained and engaged in scientific philosophy. This is interesting, he is often referred to as the father of science. Thales is recognized for breaking from the use of mythology to explain the world and the universe, instead explaining natural objects and phenomena by offering naturalistic theories and hypotheses. Almost all the other pre-Socratic philosophers followed him in explaining nature as deriving from a unity of everything, based on the existence of a single ultimate substance, instead of using mythological explanations. Aristotle regarded him as the founder of the Ionian school of philosophy, and reported Thales' hypothesis that the originating principle of nature and the nature of matter was a single material substance, water. In mathematics, Thales used geometry. Okay, this is where we're going to a little video here. He used geometry to calculate the heights of pyramids and the distance of ships from the shore. He is the first known individual to use deductive reasoning applied to geometry by deriving 4 corollaries to Thales' theorem. He is also the first known to whom a mathematical discovery has been attributed. All right, so actually, I'm going to cover the Thales' theorem. Is that okay? So I can read that, and then we'll cover the video.
Yes, go ahead.
All right, so this is so if you guys had a difficult time watching the video, I think this is the same one that's touched in the video. Yeah, let's go over with it. Okay, Thales' theorems. There are 2 theorems of Thales in elementary geometry. One known as Thales' theorem, having to do with a triangle inscribed in a circle and having the circle's diameter as 1 leg. The other theorem being also called the intercept theorem. In addition, Eudemus attributed to him the discovery that a circle is bisected by its diameter, that the base angles of an isosceles triangle are equal, and that vertical angles are equal. According to a historical note, when Thales visited Egypt, he observed that whenever the Egyptians drew 2 intersecting lines, they would measure the vertical angles to make sure that they were equal. Thales concluded that one could prove that all vertical angles are equal if one accepted some general notions such as alt straight angles are equal, equals added to equals are equal, and equals subtracted from equals are equal. The evidence for the primacy of Thales comes to us from a book by Proclus, who wrote 1,000 years after Thales, but is believed to have had a copy of Eudemus's book. Proclus wrote, Thales was the first to go to Egypt and bring back to Greece the study. He goes on to tell us that in addition to applying the knowledge he gained in Egypt, he himself discovered many propositions and disclosed the underlying principles of many others to his successors. In some case, his method being more general, in others more empirical. Other quotes from Proclus list more of Thales' mathematical achievements. They say that Thales was the first to demonstrate that the circle is bisected by the diameter, the cause of the bisection being the unimpeded passage of the straight line through the center. Thales is said to have been the first to have known and to have enunciated the theorem that the angles at the base of any isosceles triangle are equal, though in the more archaic manner he described the equal angles as similar. This theorem, that when two straight lines cut one another, the vertical and opposite angles are equal, was first discovered, as Eudemus says, by Thales, through the scientific demonstration was improved by the writer of Elements. Eudemus in his History of Geometry attributes this theorem, the equality of triangles having two angles and one side equal, to Thales. For he says that the method by which Thales showed how to find the distance of ships at sea necessarily involves this method. Pamphilo says that, having learned geometry from the Egyptians, he, Thales, was the first to inscribe in a circle a right-angled triangle, whereupon he sacrificed an ox. In addition to Proclus, Hieronymus of Rhodes also cites Thales as the first Greek mathematician. Hieronymus held that Thales was able to measure the heights of the pyramids by using a theorem of geometry now known as the intercept theorem. Here's interesting. After gathering data by using his walking stick and comparing its shadow to those cast by the pyramids, we receive variations of Hieronymus' story through Diogenes Laertius, Pliny the Elder, and Plutarch. According to Hieronymus, historically quoted by Diogenes Laertius, Thales found the height of pyramids by comparison between the lengths of the shadows cast by a person and by the pyramids. Due to the variations among testimonies, such as the story of the sacrifice of an ox on the occasion of the discovery that the angle on a diameter of a circle is a right angle, and the version told by Diogenes Laertius being accredited to Pythagoras rather than Thales. Some historians, such as Dierdix, question whether such anecdotes have any historical worth whatsoever. All right, so that's the introduction from Wikipedia, which is, I guess a little bit similar, kind of a more, a longer, I guess, explanation of what, Thales had discovered back then. So, Chase, what are your comments about what I've said?
I don't have any comments per se, but it sounds like the methods he's using can be replicated by anyone else today.
Right. Yes, that's kind of, yeah, that's why I read that's why I want to go into talking point number 6 was I'm going to question myself. So is yeah, okay, so why did John decide to go over Thalys and why, and in particular, since we're continuing the channel, he actually had, and then he had me to record it. So the way I look at it is, see, originally I thought that, I guess, Chase, you, because I remember, Chase, I showed you, before I even recorded the video, I showed you the applet, right? That
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. And you were wondering yourself, like, what, like, why the heck are we, what's the point of going over, why am I recording this video? But I feel like, the reason why that I think he chose for me to, go over it at least was, well, for one, as I read from, the Wikipedia article, you know, Thales originally was regarded. I didn't even know this because I knew of Plato, I knew of Aristotle, I knew of Pythagoras, but I never really. There was also, um, Apollonius, I think, but I never knew of Thales of Miletus. So yeah, I mean, and this guy was around like during the, the pre-Socratic era, like before, and he was of course a philosopher, right? But he was also, as you can see, is a mathematician as well. And at the time, they were, pretty much, going through, discuss. Well, I guess at the time they were trying to. Well, yeah, at the time they were, at the time, the ancient Greeks, had used mythology back then as far as, explaining, about the Greek gods and goddesses. And then this guy comes along and says, "Yo, um, you got like, it's cool that it sounds mythical or whatever, to use like, religion as a way to explain things, but what if there's a more, scientific and, empirical way to, understand nature?" So I'm sure Thales of Miletus had, asked that question and, had used, even though at the time Plato, and keep also in mind that, Plato and Socrates weren't around at that time. So at the time, the ancient Greeks were using, a systematic way to think, reason, understand nature, and, had their, I guess, had their own school of philosophy being built at that time, thousands of years ago, which, I think is quite awesome. And something that, I don't know why, especially in math class, especially, in public and private schools, they never really talk much about, the ancient Greeks, and especially they don't really talk about, the importance of geometry, and, also perhaps the importance of, Platonic philosophy, which, yeah, I can't really call it Platonic philosophy. You could just call it, a systematic tool of reasoning that they used back then.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah. So, as far as, all right. So the video. So now we're gonna go into the talking point. Of, wow. We've really like, covered a lot. It's almost, we got like 5 minutes left of the podcast. Um, so pretty much as far as the Thales of Miletus video, which covers like the parallel lines theorem. Um, there was 3 parts in the video, which basically talked about, well, here I actually have the key takeaways that I wrote down from the video, which, yeah, which I'll read up as like a comment from John Gabriel, of course, helped. I also have some other notes I can pull here. I don't know. Well, all right. So key takeaways from video. Point number one. No matter how the transversal lies over the parallel lines, its line segment ratios remain unchanged. So, it talks about the concept of proportion. This is easy to see primitively if one places the transversal so that it forms right angles with the parallel lines. Thales probably realized the property this way as he had no way to prove it. This happened much later. Thales reasoned that if the transversal moved from the right angle position, then each segment would increase or decrease proportionately. Point two. Areas of objects such as parallelograms and triangles were realized from parallel lines. Point three. Between Thales and Pythagoras, which in future videos we will go more into detail about Pythagoras, but let me just continue reading this point. So between Thales and Pythagoras, the number concept evolved, but was not fully developed until Euclid. And even then, Euclid did not write down a proper description of the derivation, which was then later discovered by John Gabriel. And if you'd like um, to see the proof of how number is derived based on Platonic philosophy, we have a video on it, and John also has a video as well that covers the concept of number. And so very briefly, I'll just say that the definition of number is the name that is a measure of a magnitude size. So, and then of course it covers the proof of that. So number four, parallel lines come after. Okay, well that we have to come with the backstory, because parallel lines come after the third requirement of Euclid's 5 requirements, which is the prologue that Euclid should have written. And he even mentions the third requirement. The third requirement is the circle path. The circle path, and from this are realized all geometric objects. Similar triangle theory developed until Pythagoras used it in his theorem. Okay, so we have two. Let's see, we have like two. Let's see, 2 points left, and so Chase, any feedback from the video and the presentation? And
I just felt like, it's hard for me to follow along because it went on John's channel, and if you've been following John for a while, you might be able to keep up with the video. But for me, it was too abstract for me to just jump in and know what was happening.
yeah, like I said, well, that's good to know, considering that. And again, I'm going to have to discuss this with John Gabriel as far as how we're going to, because we're going to be covering Pythagoras in like the next video. So
I think personally we should make a video like maybe 20 minutes to an hour long that just describes briefly the accurate history of mathematics, where accurately covers the exact progression of mathematics versus like whatever today's mathematicians want to choose, like they just cherry pick what they want as their history of mathematics. But with John, he knows the actual history of mathematics, and I think that as a base level would be good to reference to and just like branch off of that one video that we make that explains the entire history, because I think that would be easy to follow along.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, so I will send an email and discuss with John about. And let's see. So for the all right, so it's about an hour here. Um, I see your comments, Ivy. I know. Just bear with us. Part of this is also impromptu, and also I'm also doing this in support of John of the New Calculus channel. But regardless, I love you and I appreciate your support for being here. So on that note, Chase, do you have any closing thoughts of covering this video um, in the direction that we're going to be taking the New Calculus channel?
So, overall, closing thoughts, check out my channel, Akashic Librarians, on YouTube. I have plenty of videos that discuss my interpretation of mathematics, and I have a video called How to Learn Mathematics. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called, and I'm very excited to take another direction with the New Calculus channel and have people learn the real mathematics. That's all I got to say for now.
Great. Thank you. Took the words right out of my mouth. So, all right. Let's just it's been an hour, so let's wrap this up. I'm glad that we're able to at least cover this for about an hour, more or less. And would you like me to do the countdown, Chase?
Yes, please.
Cool. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Thank you for everyone joining and have a great night.
Bye bye.